Hi everyone, welcome to my new YouTube channel. My name's Therese and I've got a bit of Atlantis history that no one's heard before. Not going to find this in your history books, that's for sure. But before I begin reading, I'd like to tell you how I came across this history. I have a friend named Bonnie. She's become one of my best friends, and she's got some gifts. Her gifts are clairaudience, being able to hear the other side as well as beings, and she has some special friends of the fairy world. Yes, there is such a thing as fairies. Couple years back, I used to do nutritional videos, which I'm probably going to start doing them again. But I decided one day to do these videos up on the hill behind my house, and Bonnie watched the video and she said, "By the way, Therese, you have fairies listening to your video." Now I have heard stories of you know, of the fae from her and her friends. She has a friend named Susan who's of the fairy world, who they become really good friends. And when she told me this, I got really excited because this is all new to me. I had no idea that this world existed until I became friends with Bonnie. Now keep in mind, Bonnie and I have been friends for a couple years. So to make a long story short, one day I was in my room and we were talking about them, and I was like, God, I want to get to know them. I want to talk to them. I got to figure this out. You know, how could I hear them? How could I talk to them? And I'm like, I wonder what their names are. And Bonnie said something came to me, and the name Lacey came to me. So I got really excited, and I was like, oh, okay. So I went up there behind my hill, and it's a little place where I go to connect and meditate and relax and just be in nature, you know. And I called out for Lacey and I introduced myself, and a relationship started. I started to talk to them. I started to leave them things. And one day a light bulb went off and I thought, a video, I could do a video. So what I started to do is I started to ask questions, and I would ask question off film, and then I would turn on my video like I have right here, and I would tell the Fae to answer the question in you know, in my phone, to speak here. I wouldn't tell Bonnie what the question was, but yet my question would be answered. She would play the video for Susan, her fairy friend, and that we went on like this for quite a long time. So the communication started and we got to know each other. Then I decided, okay, let's have meetings. I want to be able to talk to them in real time, you know. So I would call Bonnie, and because she doesn't live here, she lives elsewhere. So I would call Bonnie on Messenger, and we would talk, and all of us would come together, and we got to know each other. And it's been a beautiful relationship, and it's been a beautiful time just getting to know each other. So fast forward 2 years later, they're getting to know about our world, and we talk about politics, and we talk about nutrition, and we talk about how we live and how they live, and we're just getting to see the differences, and it's just fascinating. They find our world fascinating, and I find their world fascinating. So one of the fairies, whose name is Jonathan, I wanted to know how the separation of the Fae and humanity came about. And so Jonathan started giving me a history lesson. And the history lesson starts in the days of Atlantis. And as much as I wanted to memorize it so I could just tell you, I'm going to read it. Because most of this is left in the same exact form, words that Jonathan used to tell me. I mean, I changed a little bit, but for the most part, this is Jonathan's story in his words. Now, this is the first lesson, and it's only half of the first lesson. So this is going to be many videos. And once I get through the history, we're going to go into talking about the way they live and everything. So I hope that you return to this video, and they'll get better as I go. So bear with me as I trial and error through all this. But I'm going to begin. History of the Fae, number 1. Many myths and stories from the past are rooted from the truth. They often get blown up or changed along the way, but the basics are still the truth. So thousands of years ago, on exactly how many is unknown. However, I do know that you could think of the day of that day you could think of that place called Atlantis. And that would be a good starting point for the history of the Fae and humans back then. Now, in Atlantis, we were all together. In Lemuria, we were all together. And in other places in the world, we were all together. So Atlantis, Lemuria, the humans, and the Fae all lived together. Now in Atlantis, there were hundreds and thousands of years of peace and plenty, great technology, great inventions, great understanding, and great philosophy. The Fae and the people got along and worked together nicely. However, as time passed, it soon became evident that they were only interested in their own gains. The dark set in and got hold, and the reason it began to take hold was one thing and one thing only: greed. So, humans and the fairies in the days of Atlantis lived together, they saw each other, they were able to communicate, and, you know, they lived together in harmony. But then dark set in, as I read before. And this darkness had a lot to do with greed. Humans began wanting more than other people had, and this was not the Fae kind of world. Neither was it the human kind of world at that time. It was a place where everyone had enough. Some people were very industrious, were able to have a little more, but in the long run, it was a very balanced sort of life. Until there were some souls who incarnated, who grew up feeling that somehow they were better and more entitled, and in some cases they were more intelligent and more gifted. However, because of that, the dark was able to take hold. Because they found that intellectually they were very gifted. Many of them were engineers, many of them were inventors. However, their spiritual life was like a withered plant. It was not growing. It was not doing anything. It was not of any use. There was no understanding. There was no ability to reach out. There was only the awareness of themselves. Everything that was done by these people were done only for their own benefit. And they could appear as though they were very interested in the culture and the land and the people. However, as time passed and more souls were incarnated, it soon became evident that they were only interested in their own gains, their superior lifestyle, and then it began to become very dark. So Atlantis wasn't like that before. Atlantis was a land of just abundance and love. And somehow more and more people, sorry, someone was walking by my window, more and more people became envious of others. And with that kind of energy, the darkness was able to take hold. And I'm going to continue. Then there were times where war would break out. and not the kind of war that was planned. It was the kind of war where on impulse there would be an army gathered. And on impulse, many people would be killed as a result of direction and payment. So people were getting ordered and paid to hurt others. In this situation, it began slowly. It began with skirmishes here and there, and then over perhaps 100 years, it grew. It grew to the point of being unable to sustain the lifestyle that had been theirs in Atlantis for many years. So, the Fae, in all that time, had worked very closely with humanity. And in fact, there were many situations where, like today, there would be humans living in a house, and there would be Fae living in a house on the same land right next door, and they would work together for everything. They were just like one big neighborhood, just like now. It's just that you can't see them. So we have fairies that live in our house, we have fairies that live outside of our house, and all around us. The difference is back then, they could be seen and heard, and they all lived together in harmony till that the darkness set in. So the Fae and humans all knew each other. They all knew what everyone was capable of. They knew that they could build. They knew everything they wanted to do. And as time went by, they found that often the humans that were part of the family were murdered. And this happened quite often. And then it happened more and more. And then it was not just a house. It was a village. And then it was a whole county and several villages. And the Fae became very frightened. And of course, the saddest part is that the Fae were being disseminated in these skirmishes and wars. And the Fae had no way of understanding any of it. So it never was like this before. So trying to remove someone because you want what they have or feel you should have more than them was not the Fae way of life. They came to an understanding over thousands of years that this is all based on fear. It was all fear that caused this. Fear of not having enough. Fear and envy. So the whole concept of greed that made all this happen was fear of not having enough and greed of wanting more. And up until this point, the only thing that created so much anger and panic and downright hatred was the fear of not having enough. And greed can be worthless. Fear is what's very powerful, more powerful than greed. It is not more powerful than love. Nothing is more powerful than love, as we know. However, if you have enough people thinking that they need to be fearful of something, that can be very powerful and very dark. And the dark will take that as a tool and use it. Therefore, at that point, after so many thousands of years of beautiful, beautiful culture, and truly Atlantis was a beautiful, beautiful land of clear skies and farms and buildings and beautiful statues and artwork and everything clean and pristine and just living in harmony and peace. Then as time began to bring in a shadow, so as time went by, a shadow fell. It began to resemble a dirty city, such as Los Angeles. The city of angels, as Jonathan said, was dark, and it had a cloud over it. This darkness was not pollution like the city of today. It was from the spiritual atmosphere of the souls living there, and it was becoming more and more dark. So let me explain the darkness. If you walk into a dark room where there are 5 angry people, you can almost see it. You can almost see it like a dark mist. You can certainly feel it. And you would certainly walk out of the room as soon as you could. That is what happened in Atlantis, but over many, many years. The Fae at that time were very innocent. The Fae did not know what this was, because although the Fae have very strong faith, they were in some ways what you might call childlike. They, as individual souls, had no reason to believe there would be any harm coming, and they were very much aware that there was more than enough, more than enough for everyone. There was bounty and abundance everywhere. There are times when one has to work, of course, as we know. They knew that was true, and that was the difference between humans and the Fae. Now comes the uncomfortable part of the story. Some of the Fae civilization also were attracted by the greed and the fear and darkness. Hold on, let me go back. Some of the Fae civilization also were attracted by greed and fear and darkness. The Fae who chose to follow the light, the good, did not understand why they felt that way, other than there was a sense of, how can I say this? Admiration for the humans who were beginning to collect nicer objects, better food, better clothing. Items like this, of course, the Fae saw all of this. They saw all of this. The Fae following the light, the good Fae, saw all of this happening. Some of the Fae began thinking the same way and allowed the greed to set in. Today, you have some myths and stories about what man calls goblins or trolls. There are also stories about demons and tall beings. These dark entities, which were much like dark humans, were outcast and beyond help. This fear and greed was vast, and through the ages, there have been Fae who have cried when telling these stories. Only because they knew, on a deep inner heart spiritual level, they know what the pain was like. They know what the fear was in those days. And the worst part of it is that it has been repeated again and again over the years. Some of the Fae began changing until there were generations of dark spirits that did not look like normal Fae. So over the years, the Fae they changed from becoming dark, and their physical appearance also changed. Sorry, there's someone out front. Okay, I'm going to continue. So that is the context behind the division between humanity and the Fae. So what happened at that time was coming up to the eventual apocalypse that occurred. The Fae, who had great contact with spirit, had developed the ability to communicate with the higher realms, asked the angels and all the good spirits and beings of light for help. So they wanted help, and they prayed, and they asked for help. In the beginning, they were expected to make efforts to work things out, trying with their own ideas and their own communication and kindness and all of those things to heal this darkness. So they tried really hard to heal this darkness. They tried to make it work out so that those who were affected would begin to understand that it was not doing anyone any good. It was destroying the beautiful place they had built in Atlantis. The difficult thing about that, from what has been told, is that one is dealing with several generations of those who were brought up to think they were better, more, that they deserve more, that others should work for them, and that they basically didn't have to add anything to society. Sounds familiar, right? Don't we have elites today who believe the same way? So let me continue. They did not have the to actually work. So several generations believed this. It was very difficult, and the Fae who were affected by this became downright evil, just like the humans who were affected. Downright evil. And this is the same, or this is to some extent what they are today. So this this continued, and even today we've got good Fae, we've got dark Fae, we've got good humans, and we've got dark humans. So what happened as a result of their attempt to bring peace and to bring healing? The angels, all of the guides and the guardians, and all those who had power for good came to the understanding that they could not heal the darkness alone. Therefore, they decided the best thing would be to create a division so that those Fae with good hearts could not be seen by anyone of the dark. And that includes both humans and Fae of the dark. So at this point, if there is an evil creature, an evil Fae, or an evil anything that is of their own civilization or was, they cannot see them either. Therefore, they can go about their daily life protected. They can do what they have always done, make a good life, and live joyfully, and learn, create, build, write, make music, do art, and just live a good life. So all the things that are joyful, they can still do, and they know that they cannot be seen. And that is why we can't see these people. Spirit decided that they had to separate humans and fairies. And even though they live in this world, that separation is here. And apparently that the Fae that fell really, really dark can't see the good Fae as well. And Jonathan will continue with these stories, and he's got some story of his own regarding this. Jonathan mentioned that there have been times when he stood right in front of a dark fairy, and he called them a gray being. But when he says gray, he does not mean gray the way that us humans think of aliens. He means gray being as in a fairy that is leaning towards the dark, who isn't good, to the point where there are no longer good at all. This Fae could have been saved long ago, however, chose not to go in that direction. He stood right in front, Jonathan stood right in front of this Fae, and he did not see Jonathan at all. He was 2 inches away from him, and he did not see him. Therefore, that is the life they live now, unseen. And all these years, they've gotten used to this. Now, over centuries, many times the Fae have attempted to help humans who were still in the light, and many times it worked. Many times we have been in their wars, in their sadness, right there, 2 inches away, and they cannot see them. So the Fae have gone through a lot with humans, and during wars that we've had and things like that, and they've tried to help them, and they've been there trying to help them, but unfortunately they can't be seen. Let me continue. Jonathan mentioned that out of all the fables that he heard as a child, that the good Fae would be able to be seen by the good humans. He said that only now, as an adult, he believes that God and his angels have more sense than to keep it to individuals. It had to be an overall division, an overall change, so that all of them could be at peace. Therefore, it seems we are watching the same thing happen in this world at this time. they have known for a very long time that something dark was coming and that it would be very much as it was before. However, they were hoping that the division would be would be healed, and they believe it will eventually. So, I believe that too. I believe that eventually, as our ascension continues and as people become aware of the darkness and as the darkness begins to be revealed, that eventually it's going to get to a point where we can see the fairies again. I really hope so anyways. Let me continue reading. Where was I? They have known for a very long time that something they have known for a very long time that something dark was coming and that it would be very much as it was before. However, they were hoping that the division would be healed and they would believe it will be. Okay, I read that. However, there are those who have been in power for so long, so very long, since Atlantis. Some of these families, and now there are Fae families as well, they have been in power so long, it is like a block, like a huge boulder sitting in the middle of the road that cannot be moved unless there is tremendous effort. And it cannot be moved physically, it must be moved spiritually. So as they see things happen in the world, they know between Bonnie and myself and others that they have listened to along the way, there will be a rebirth. There will be a new beginning. And in a way, it will be like going backward. It will be like all of the things that fell apart, all the things that block your way in their beautiful place on this beautiful planet, they will find their way. They will go back to the light. They will lose the fear. They will lose the anger. They will lose the greed. They will begin to realize that they have everything they need and they are loved, and that will fuel it. And I believe it's happening today. I really do. As a collective, we are starting to realize all of this. However, not all the Fae believe this. The ones that do believe this, such as Jonathan, believe it will take a very long time. It may not happen in our lifetime. However, we will see big changes over several years. It took several hundred years for the fall of Atlantis, but healing evolves much faster, depending on how many people are focused on it. Healing is often much faster than the injury itself. Many of the Fae and us humans are hoping for the healing to happen. This type of injury is not like a sword or a cut. It is like a slow growth of something moldy, a slow growth of something that can sicken a soul. Therefore, the healing is often quite simply the wiping away of all darkness and the undergrowth. The things that are rotten, they are dissolved. Therefore, we would say at this point in time, we are thinking of the ancient past as coming full circle. Jonathan said he could go into a different past centuries of Atlantis, but that was a time before history was kept, a time before records were kept. Of course, there are many tales of how Atlantis disappeared. A great deal of it had to do with the misuse of the land that created earthquakes and instability that created tsunamis, all kinds of things that happened to bring about the end. And yes, Atlantis is on the bottom of the ocean, along with many other civilizations that went the same way. So it wasn't just Atlantis that got taken over by the dark. There's been many civilizations that have gotten taken over by the dark. And personally, this is me talking, I have learned other planets as well. So we cannot say they will all rise to the surface, meaning these civilizations that were buried under the ocean. The Fae and Jonathan say that the kind of life that was created there will be created again. However, it will depend on humanity learning that there is enough for everybody, that no one is above another, that everything depends on the way that our life is lived, and that is the only thing that determines what you have or do not have, need or do not need. The way your life is lived is what brings all together, what brings all of the expansive abundance of everything. The most difficult thing to get across is the idea that there is no need for envy, no need for plotting and planning and taking over someone else. That is where the people of Atlantis began to feel powerless and lost. Because these dark issues, these dark entities, they rob the rest of them of their sense of sovereignty, their sense of being an individual with an individual will and the ability to be completely independent or interdependent. The dark was very powerful. So as the collective grew in the darkness grew stronger and was able to take hold, unfortunately. And so the Fae who stayed in the light had to protect themselves, and so they asked Spirit for protection, and Spirit came to the conclusion that the separation must happen until things healed. So that's the end of the history for now. The next video I make this is going to continue, and we will talk about a period of time in the 12th century, and we will speak of the Druids. So that's history part 1. And thank you for listening, and I will hopefully in other videos figure out a way to deliver this without having to read it. But for now, I don't have it memorized, and Jonathan's giving it to me, and I want to make sure that I don't forget anything. So all of you have a beautiful day, and please join me and share this video with those who you think will resonate with it. And if what I just read to you doesn't sit in your soul as truth, I'm sorry. You know, that's fine. You can move on and don't watch my other videos. But if it does, and you want to learn more about the history, I will continue. And once I'm done with the history, I'm going to go into the life of the Fae and how they live and the differences between their world and our world and the similarities between their world and our world. And it's actually quite fascinating. So thank you for joining.